Good morning. My name is Carol Theness, and I would like to share with you briefly a glimpse into my life in the night I met the Lord. I was not fortunate enough to be raised in a Christian home, so there was no Christian values imparted, but an enormous amount of dysfunctional. And right out of high school, I was engaged to a very wonderful young man that was in the military and stationed in Alaska, and we became engaged, and Joe sent me my ring, and we were to be married when he came home on his next leave. But when he came home on his next leave, through a great misunderstanding, Joe broke the engagement, and with that decision, he set in motion a chain of events that just about destroyed both of us. So it was then finding myself back on the social scene and dating again. I was introduced to social drinking, and what became an adventure turned into a lifestyle and then an addiction that set my path on a road that led to almost destruction. I tried desperately to stop on my own. And finally, I went to AAs. That didn't work. I went to medical doctors. I went to some sessions with psychiatrists. I did everything I knew to do to stop drinking. I didn't want to be that person anymore. I wanted my kids to be proud of me, you know. And I was not a falling down drunk by any means. But when I was home, and most of the time I worked, but when I was home, I always had a drink sitting somewhere that I was sipping on. I stayed pleasantly high all the time. So that particular day, when I got up that morning, I didn't realize that it was going to be the time in my life where God would change everything. By 11 o'clock that night, I was literally climbing the walls. I thought, I am going crazy if I don't get out of this house. When I got in the car to start driving, I began to calm down. I began to get to this agitation, all of these things began to leave little by little, and by the time I got the car off of the highway, I was calm. All of that was gone, and I was peaceful. And that's when the Lord began to speak to me. And this most wonderful, powerful, authoritative voice spoke and said, Carol, you have tried everything man has to offer. Now why don't you try me? I can still hear him say that. I said, God, will you help me with my problem? I just wanted to stop drinking. I had no more idea than a man in the moon what I had just done. I didn't really know until the next morning. But I knew in that moment when I said, will you help me with my problem? John, something took place inside of me that I can't explain. I can tell you what happened, but I don't know how to explain it. But down deep inside of me, there became a fountain like champagne bubbles that filled me up and just moved up and out the top of my head and showered all over me. And had it been a tangible, real thing that you could see, I would have been drenched. But it was a sensation, and it was powerful, and it was real. And the minute this stuff came out and showered, then I was filled with joy that's unspeakable and full of glory. There was a deep, abiding assurance deep inside of me where all of this activity that had taken place the night before, this assurance, I will never drink again. And I said, God, let me live long enough that this time, when I tell them I don't drink again, it's real. They will know that this time it's real. That was my first prayer as a Christian. Let me live long enough to tell all of these people this time it's real. And I didn't have sense enough to keep my mouth shut. Everybody that ever knew that I drank, look at me. I don't drink anymore. Hey, I was freed of that bondage. I was free of something that I had no control over. It was gone. So Sunday morning, I was in church. on that front bench waiting for that preacher to shut up so I could tell everybody I don't drink anymore. And then there was, we spent a lot of, the kids and I went to church. We established our life in church. And there was a lot of good things that took place in that following year. And God directed my life back to Arkansas to be with my mother. We had lost Dad the year before, and she was alone and quite elderly. So I found myself back in that little house where my life had all started when I left as a young woman. My life had come full circle, and I was back where it all started. And 4 years later, God, after 43 years, God brought Joe and I back together. And we were married. God gave us almost 23 years of fun and laughter. We laughed our way through those 23 years. We had so much fun. We had so much in common, and we both had made miserable choices in mates. And then 3 years ago, Joe went home to be with the Lord. All I can ever do is share what God's love is. It covers us all, and it covers everything in our life. He is an awesome God, and He does awesome things for us, things we don't even know about. There is nothing in our life that He cannot deal with and handle. And yes, I am old, and I have had a most wonderful life, even with all of the mistakes, because going back, I guess you have to go back to when I was knitted together in my mother's womb. God has had His hand of protection on me, taking care of me and guiding me into His paths of righteousness, into His ways. Yeah, I've had a good life. I've had a really good life.